And good morning. I forgot to mention Sue last week. It was so good to see her after her surgery and able to be back with us. This is 2 in a row, and so we're grateful for her strength. Good to see Jana with us as well after her surgery. She goes, everything's well with the one, but now, of course, the compensation always makes now the other one's got the problem. See, that happens with those knees, I guess. So we're so grateful for everyone that is here this morning. And especially if you are visiting, we're so encouraged that you've come our way. And we often ask if you could just remain briefly just after services so we can get to know you a little bit. And for those who studied in the class, know that they're supposed to be more on the greeting one another category. So maybe we'll get a little bit more of that today. There is something that can happen even in a Christian's life. They could have been a Christian relatively a short time, or maybe even for generations. It can happen to maybe even the most devoted, faithful follower of Christ. In fact, it can happen to any one of us right now. As you'd say, well, maybe the best of what Christian life has to offer. And you can come in a setting like that in this and hear talk of a Christian life, hearing the expression of having love that's found in Jesus and the hope that we have within him, and a hope like no other. And we can talk about having a peace that surpasses all understanding and a joy within us, a Christian. And we may have all of those and what a Christian can have and possess. But still, with all that mentioned, one can still have some overwhelming feelings of doubt and frustration. The why me syndrome. Why God? Why now? Why this? And sometimes it can be so heavy. And it's what I want to address today, to talk a little bit more about the subject, because in reality, any one of us can come to frustration. But frustrations at times that can get so drastic that, dare I say, to the point of wanting to give up. Even a point of wanting to die. Or the question of even being born in the first place. I guess you could say that's the lowest of lows. And that's a pretty serious charge. And yet I find some very prominent men in the Bible that have had the very same thought in their lives, and that is really an encouragement. Because a lot of times we're left alone with, I shouldn't think those thoughts, I shouldn't have those feelings. And there's a war within us. And these individuals cried out to God, and so much going on record, because it's written for us in print for us to see what they said. We have the words that they spoke from the heart. And right now, I want to share the message with you today that you are not alone if you feel like that right now, or have ever felt like that. Let me add to the point that you are not weak and a failure. You are not unfaithful with your thoughts. You may have doubts. And doubt can be described as really kind of a waiting out, a wait and see approach as you wait for more information. I'll kind of throw in the category like Thomas did. See, he had doubt, and that's why we say a doubting Thomas. But he did not have a totally failure when it came to belief. He didn't get to the point of total unbelief. And what I mean by that, a total unwillingness to believe, like many of the Pharisees did. They had many opportunities to believe that he was the Son of God. Many miracles that were performed. There were a lot of things that still caused them unbelief, and it was really a heart problem. They just refused to believe, even with all the facts before them. That is really a rebellion. And unbelief is a conscious effort to say, even when presented with all the facts, I still will not. Now that's a different category. Unbelief would not be described as Thomas. It would be, if it was in his case, he would be the one to refuse after he saw Jesus standing in front of him, after he touched the marks on his sides and his hands and his feet, And after seeing all that and placing his hand in his side saying, I still don't believe it's you. No, he doesn't get to that point, but you can understand he had a doubt. And even though his doubt was very strong because he had all of his disciples, his friends, his companions, the ones closest to him that also walked with Jesus, that told him for a fact that they saw the risen Savior. And he says, I will not believe unless I see for myself. So we get a little hard on him, but we also comes to believe because we know that Jesus says that. He says, quite frankly, he just basically says to him that you have seen and believed, but blessed are those who have not seen and believed. He doubted for sure, but then he did believe eventually, never getting to the point of unbelief. And we need to hear the differences of having some doubt in our lives, in times of our lives, over willful, stubborn rebellion. Because I'm afraid there are some that can send the wrong kind of message to those who struggle. A different message to those who have some doubt, even to those who sometimes question God, as I said. Why God? Why now? Why me? I don't know how much more of this I can take. If you've ever said that or thought that, it's okay. From time to time, we may experience those feelings and have those questions. In fact, some of God's chosen and some very elect showed too, they had some of those feelings at one time or another in their life. That can be found in all of us. Have some doubt, have some reservations, have some frustrating things going on in lives. And hopefully, after that, we will take their examples to encourage each other for all of us to keep going and to persevere. The first place I would like to travel back to is found with Moses. Now, he isn't the first in the examples, but it's a good beginning for our part. It's not where Moses had doubt in the beginning by being appointed by God. If you remember, well, I am not of good speech, and you don't really want to pick me. There was some kind of a doubt in his selection. I don't really want to use that part. He told God that he wasn't the man. He was fine where he had been. He was shepherding these past 40 years. And he was not the Moses who saw the burning bush either, who was to put his hand inside his cloak to pull it out, to find it full of leprosy, only to put it back and take it back out brand new. God was showing him. And then he took the staff and made it a serpent. I'm not even talking about that. This is the one that I want to go beyond further, the one who took the Israelite people out of captivity, who saw all the plagues that God sent, that the death angel came and spared a nation, crossed them over onto dry land. Now, there's a lot of witnessing God's ultimate power through that. So why would a man like this ever question God to go any further? He witnessed the parting of the Red Sea and walked his people across dry land, who went up to the mountain to bring down the law. No, this would be after. This would still be later on down the road. And just think, after seeing all that, how could one ever get to the frustrating point that Moses does? We usually ask the question of those of the Israelite nation, why they question God. Why have you sent us out here to die? We're out in the wilderness. Moses, that's all you've brought us out here to do, is to die. They questioned. But I want you to picture those in the wilderness getting all of God's provision daily, of the daily manna and the water, and they had grown tired of the manna and wanting other things, they especially meat in this case. They had no meat to eat, and crying out to Moses. And then Moses cries out to God in this way over in Numbers chapter 11, starting with verse 10. Now Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, each man at their doorway of his tent. And the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly, and Moses was displeased. So Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you been so hard on your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight that you have laid the burden of all of this people on me? Was it I who conceived all of this people? Was it I who brought them forth, that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing infant to the land which you swore to their fathers? Where am I going to get meat to give all these people, for they weep before me, saying, give us meat that we may eat. Verse 14. I alone am not able to carry all this people because it is too burdensome for me. So if you are going to deal thus with me, please kill me at once. I just want to die. I can't, it's too burdensome for me. I cannot go on. If I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness. Do you hear the desperation in Moses' voice? He says, why are you so hard on me? Do you not find favor with me in your sight that I'm having to go through all of this? Have we ever said that before God? He says, I alone, I am not able to carry the load of all of these people because it's too much. So if this is how this is to go, seen it before, opened up earths and swallowed up disobedient people, then just kill me at once. Is this what Moses is really saying, begging for God to let him die? He cannot go on. Now we know that God gives him the strength that he needs. But still doesn't take away the fact that Moses thought this way and cried out in this way, petitioned God in this way. And when you say that Moses had a great relationship with God, I would say more so than what we have attained. Sure. And even he grew weary. The New Testament tells us not to grow weary in doing good in Galatians 6 and 9. Now let's flip over to Job. In Job chapter 3, and notice his desperation, of course, with his ultimate extreme situation. He starts out by saying, let the day perish of which I was born. That's the, don't let me die. Why was I even born if I'm going to go through this? No birthday party for me. I don't want it. He loathed the day he was born. Let the day never have existed. That is very strong language. Let it not be in the number of months. Is that not extreme? Getting down to verse 11, why did I not die at birth? Wouldn't even have started all this. Or maybe this found in verse 16, or like a miscarriage which is discarded, I would not be as infants that never saw light. I would say I've never wished that I never was born. We're talking about someone that we look up to, the strength of the stuff that he did endure, that during some tough times really questioned it. If you have time, go back and read that whole chapter 3 of Job. He wished that he didn't even exist. If this is what my life was all about and have come to be, it's not a very happy place with God or anyone else at this time for Job. This is someone who is crying out and wished that they were never born with all the strife his life was going through at the time. And remember, this is the one that God pointed out to Satan, hey, have you seen my servant Job? And the devil said, well, he is only your servant because you protect him and give him all the blessings of life. Job comes through, and in the end, he perseveres through it all, even after family and friends, well-meaning in their own sight, but really doesn't give him the best counsel. He and his own wife tells him to just curse God and die. Just go back and read chapter 3 of Job, sometimes to get where his desperation was at the time. Job, Moses, the prophet Elijah. In 1 Kings 19:1 through 4, after being tracked down, wanted to take him down. Now that Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword, then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and even more if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree and requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough. Now, O Lord, take my life, for I am not better than my fathers. We could also include Jonah, who was told to go and preach to the town of Nineveh, and after his shade tree died, in Jonah 4, verse 8, said in his cry to the Lord, when the sun came up, and God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head, so that he became faint, and begged with all his soul to die. It wasn't just a request, oh boy, just God take me now. With all of his soul and all of seriousness wanting to die, death is better to me than life. Now it sounds a little shallow. And God tells him in verse 9, and God said to Jonah, do you have good reason to be angry about the plant? And he says, I have good reason to be angry even to death. Then the Lord said, you had compassion on the plant for which you did not work and which you did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. Should I not have compassion on Nineveh, the great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know the difference between their right and their left hand, as well as many of their animals? You want to die over that? 120,000 people saved, and you want to die. Even John the Baptist, who paved the way for Christ, who proclaimed, behold, the Lamb of God, while in prison, sent word to Jesus in Luke 7:20. When the men came to him, they said, John the Baptist has sent us to you to ask, are you the expected one, or do we look for someone else? Now, he doesn't have a request to die, but his whole way was to pave the pathway to Christ. And he's imprisoned, and maybe he gets it a little bit different in his mindset that he's going to be placed on the throne, and he's going to set the captive free, and he's a captive, and he's in a dungeon, and he's hearing all the great works of Jesus, and he goes, maybe this isn't the guy. And was frustrated. See, he knew the prophecy spoke of him restoring the kingdom. Maybe that's it. And here he was stuck in the dungeon awaiting a death sentence to be carried out. Are you the expected one, or did I get this wrong? Should we be looking for someone else? This is not happening like I would like. This is not happening as I have come to expect in all of their cases. Just from those Bible verses alone, and we could add others, it is quite easy to see that even the greatest prophets in the Bible had moments of despair. And I know as I look out in the audience of some of you that have gone through disparaging times, that you just didn't think, can I take any more? You're not alone. They all had moments, and some of them, they threw up their hands and said, God, please kill me. Take my life and let me die now. I'm done with this life right now and all of what this corrupt world has to offer. I have no reason to live. I think it's a natural human response that when life becomes overwhelming, we may want to give up. We may want to press an exit button and simply shut down. That's why, unfortunately, in drastic times, suicides go on the rise, especially from very young people that have their whole lives in front of them, that they just can't see the forest for the trees. They can't see beyond the tragedy. They can't see beyond the pain, and maybe even suggest to have their lives terminated. And I'll tell you what, that is probably one of the greatest tactics of our adversary, that have many laid waste by his discouragement, or should I say encouragement, to quit, to just give up. What's the use? Telling us, you see, God doesn't really care for you or love you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be going through this. Now, that does not come from the Bible. It comes straight from hell itself. And when we turn on the news and see it's not getting better, Stephen Weldon said in his prayer that children molested and women raped and people murdered and criminals avoiding jail and haters of God and immoral acts and more of this world can look pretty hopeless. But we have to remember, as children of God, we are all here for a purpose, and it's His purpose. Let's never forget that. Even if it is a whatever it is that's going on right now. And all things will eventually play into God's sovereign plan. if we keep trusting him and in him, just as God had purposed these men that we mentioned, see, that was not the end of their story. If you didn't know the Bible, they cry out and say, well, what did God do? I don't know the Bible story. Did the earth just open up and swallow them up? Did a lightning bolt come down from heaven? They also were purposed in their lives. Sure, Moses had a moment where he wished death, but he also marched on to fulfill God's plan for his life, and it now is considered one of the greatest prophets of the Old Testament. And yes, Job lost his health, wealth, and family, but was blessed by God and eventually got double of everything except for the children that he lost previously. Elijah may have had the moments of despair, but he eventually rides into the heavens in a whirlwind on a chariot of fire and is referenced as one of the greatest prophets. And Jonah, despite wanting to die after going through so much effort, was able to save a city of over 120,000 people with his preaching. Do you wish God would simply let you leave this earth? Yes, life gets tough. And aren't we glad he doesn't really listen to our moment request? Because maybe we backtrack that later. Remember kind of when I said that? Well, I'm not kind of feeling that way right now. Because the sun has come up and it's kind of changed my direction. I imagine that the prophets too were very glad that God didn't take them up on their offer. Because if they would have never experienced a greater reward later that they didn't know at the time they were going through this. And that would have been taken all away with an early exit. So really, who knows better? When you feel as if you can't go on, remember the great men and women that we did not mention have felt the same way that you have. People who went on to change the world felt exactly like us at times. And just like Job, you may lose it all one day, your health, your wealth, and even loved ones to that extreme. But don't give up one day on the Lord, because it may come back to you in double. Like Joseph, you could be imprisoned in a strange land one day as a slave and sitting as second in command to a powerful nation the next. One day a prisoner, and in the same day, when he got up in slave mode, at the end of the day, was second in command. You too may be sent out of Egypt as a murderer on the run like Moses and leading a nation to freedom years later. In all things, never forget that God does have a divine plan, and we are all partners in his sovereign ways. But we must learn to our ultimate trust to be put in him. And when the ways of the world get you down, look up to our risen Christ to know that God always keeps his promises and that one day it will all be worth it, just as it was for them spoken in those days gone by. Whether in this world or the next, God will bless his children, how he wants to take us under his wing, like the hen and her chicks. But know also we can have times of doubt, but they don't have to be rebellious, willful unbelief. Just have some doubt. Just don't lose heart during that time. Keep trusting in God, because it will be so worth it in the end. You'll see. I hope that's been an encouragement to you, because times can be tough. Things can come our way that we really want to question, and that's all right to question. God's seen it before. As it says in Scripture, there's nothing new under the sun. We're not surprising God with a thought. We're not surprising God with what we can come up with. It's been done before. There's an example of those too. But these speak as encouragements to all of us to keep persevering. Persevering also implies there'll be trials. In order to persevere, you have to go through something. Tested and tried, we hope that we'll come out as fine gold. If we can be of help to you, whether pray with you or for you, we'd love the opportunity. Remember, you never obeyed the gospel and wouldn't like to have an opportunity to go unnoticed, to say everything is ready and everything is prepared for that moment, if that's your desire. If there's a prayer request that needs to be known at this time, if you'll come now as we stand and as we sing.